Hey everybody, today I'm going to be doing two things at once, downloading some files and answering a question from a patron. Let's get to it. So, question today is from Rumbumba. How do you balance ease of understanding with a learning curve for complex mechanics that are rewarding to discover or master? Now, as you might expect, this is something that needs to be solved differently for every game, and there are as many approaches as there are designers. So I'm not trying to say that this is the answer, it's just my approach. Also, to the surprise of no one who knows me or plays my games, I don't tend to design based on strict forms and rubrics. I keep things pretty free-flowing, and I think that gets better results overall. But for this, I decided to try and digest my process into a rubric that I can apply, and the results were actually really helpful and really interesting. My main focus is on helping beginners to get off the ground, because that's when people need the most help and when people are most likely to give up. Making sure that intermediate on up players can keep learning and improving is secondary, but still very important. So for this, I organized my thoughts into a 4-point rubric. First point is guessing. It must be possible to achieve something through random flailing. This doesn't necessarily mean winning or completing anything. It just means that totally new players should be able to see some positive effect from their actions. This is the difference between the absence of immediate success being a setback versus being a brick wall. Now, of course, most people won't be fully randomly guessing, but that's my baseline to ensure that no matter how much people understand, they can still learn the next lesson and keep growing. Second point is gentleness. Beginners should be punished for failure as little as possible. This is important to a lesser extent later on as players develop resilience over time, but excessive punishments are still a pet peeve of mine. I really want this to be a game where people can experiment and practice and try things, because I think that's what leads to people being able to pull off the most and get away with the most over time, which is sort of a core value of the game. Number 3 is feedback. Players have to receive lots of clear feedback about the immediate effects of their actions. Doesn't matter if they have success if they don't know they have success. Number 4 is documentation. Advanced players and preparation-oriented players are going to want the hard numbers backing things up. Some designers like to try to conceal that in the sort of view of immersion. But for me, I like to just have the numbers out there because that's what people are actually working with. So let's take a look at 2 examples. One that's going well and one that needs some work. I think that ship flight mechanics are a great example of a complex and rewarding mechanic that's gotten a lot easier to learn. So first point, guessing. Ships now spawn turned on and in skim mode, which means that a player can go pretty much anywhere by just pressing W to go forward and moving the mouse to turn left and right. For gentleness, ships are built tough to shake off a lot of collision damage and automatically right themselves in that skim mode that they start in. They're also easily replaced if destroyed and can be safely tested without going on any kind of dangerous mission. So it's pretty low risk and you're not likely to get into a bad state. For feedback, ships have a speedometer and several other dashboard icons that describe their current status. And of course, you're in the cockpit so you can just see where the ship is. For documentation, the ship's hardpoints and flight characteristics are laid out in the ship selection screen, but there's nothing in-game that actually tells you which buttons to press, to go forward, to use a mounted tool, any of that. So I do need to fix that. So overall, ships are mostly passing. Making flying approachable is a major priority of mine, as it's a bread and butter skill that most players will use throughout the game. I also want it to be an expressive, high skill ceiling system, which is why it doesn't have a lot of the sort of curbs and bumpers that a lot of other games apply to their flying systems. That's a trade-off that I'm happy to make, but it does mean that there's a bit more effort that needs to be put into helping people learn. Things are much improved from the first alpha versions, but I do need to get some reminders in-game for the controls. This only covers the basics of flight, of course, but once you're up in the air, you'll inevitably figure out lots of little tricks, like flying low to shake missiles or putting a truck in hover mode and then climbing out on the roof to have a platform. Decryption, on the other hand, needs a little more work. Let's think about why. So the first point, guessing. There are 512 possible solutions for the simplest 3x3 puzzle. Also, puzzles are either solved or not with no in between, so guessing is completely ineffective in most cases. If you're going to solve the puzzle, you need to understand the puzzle completely and have a plan, or just get really lucky. Number 2 is gentleness. There are some practice boards back at base, which does help this a bit, but the selection of puzzles on those boards is random and small, so an unlucky beginner might not find anything that they can solve. Number 3 is feedback. Now, every few seconds, your side will advance a step, showing you what your current answer solves to. A different part of the maintenance puzzle shifts when you solve the puzzle too. So there's a little bit of information, but really not much. And number 4, documentation. There's no documentation of this puzzle whatsoever in the game, which is a big problem, especially given the abstract nature of the puzzles. Overall, when you really break it down, the decryption puzzle isn't really a puzzle or a minigame at all. It's a question with an answer, and you are left to your own devices to solve or memorize that answer. The game doesn't even really help much. This is actually kind of a cool and useful insight for me, and I'm glad you asked this question. I'm generally happy with the progress I'm making on the various hacking systems, but this decryption minigame is sort of a crappy bottleneck, I think. So I'm really looking forward to the hacking revamp when I can figure out a couple of better options to fill this role. You may have noticed that at no point did I mention any kind of separate tutorial. That's because experimentation and learning are the heart of the game and the main progression of the game. I'm trying to create an interconnected mesh of worlds within which players can experience and exploit an interconnected mesh of systems. And that means that, ideally, you'll build your skills or learn something new every time you play. That's the dream anyway. We'll see how far we make it. Let me know what you think of this system in the comments, on the Discord, or at the grocery store while I'm accidentally egging the self-checkout. Thanks again to Rumbumbum for asking the question, and to both my patrons for supporting the project and me. Take care, have fun, and if you choose to subscribe, I'll see you next time.